So there was a question in there somewhere. I just can't remember what it was.
I'll work it out, DC. I'll work out the question.
Can I ask DC a question? He talked about who was the last Italian world champion, DC, and when?
I think it was like Nuvolari in the 50s.
Ascari, 1953. Okay, move on. Now it's your turn, Rob. Let's hear.
Eddie was there.
You see what I'm having to deal with? A nincompoop.
Eddie was his boss.
Yeah, his manager.
No, I was his financial advisor.
Hello and welcome to Formula for Success. I'm David Coulthard, and with me is the grandad with the growl. It's Eddie Jordan.
Growl. Grandad with a growl. That's a new one, David. Well done. I like it.
Well, I've got my script writers are getting creative. And with us is the former Ferrari, Williams, and of course, Jordan engineer. It's Rob Smedley. Welcome back, Rob.
Well done, Rob.
Morning, boys.
You must have done something right the last time you were on.
Well, like we were just talking about, before it kicked off, I've been writing in every week.
Please have me back. Please have me back. David, you've got the questions. Let's go.
Well, look, first of all, thank you for joining us again. Our first guest to be on the show twice. It was a very popular show, great reviews from the anchors. So, look, we wanted to tap into your looking from the outside. You know, you still have your overview in Formula One, you still have your involvement, but you're not at the coal-face week in, week out, which, as you know, is relentless, difficult to sort of step back and see the wood from the trees. Shall we start with just running through the teams, and then we'll get into the sort of how it is when you're actually there trying to develop a car. So let's start with a World Championship team. That's Red Bull Racing, Max and Checo. Where do you kind of feel their performance has been so far?
I find Red Bull and possibly McLaren the biggest enigma of this season. So I think that Red Bull have to do something. They no longer have. I mean, it's clear, right? They don't have the fastest car by a country mile. I can remember sitting on this podcast and we all said we all thought that Max was going to be the 2024 world champion. Because that's what it felt like at that point in the season. I think, had we even turned a wheel yet? But we'd done winter testing and it looked like it was all going to go off as previous years. And then they have, I wouldn't say faltered, but they haven't developed the car as fast. And definitely that car is not as comfortable as the previous year's car. Now, is that just because they don't have the advantage that they had? And so the drivers and the engineers, they all try a little bit harder and all the foibles of the car come out, or they just haven't developed it? I don't know. But definitely they don't feel as strong and as coherent as in previous years. And then, as you mentioned, DC, like Checo as well, you know, he's got to start where I come from. We say doing the patsy. He's got to start doing the patsy for the team, right?
Yeah, no, it is interesting that you think that the two enigmas are the two teams that are actually first and second in the constructors. But it is a very good point to try and put a finger on consistency of performance. There's 30 points between McLaren and Red Bull, and there's only 34 points back to Ferrari, who have been the sort of silent team of the season in many ways. But before we go to Ferrari then, a quick one on McLaren, their resurgence from being almost last 2 years ago in Abu Dhabi to where now it feels that they're for the first time starting to think again like world champions rather than just trying to get good results at Grand Prix.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they've had a change in mindset there, and that's been really important. But they've also made some really good changes to their organization, you know, and this is where the enigma is for me, because, you know, I don't think that the previous management, you know, if you're going to get to be a CEO or a team principal or a technical director or whatever it is in Formula One, then you didn't get there by accident. So I don't think the previous management kind of misstepped that badly. But then if you take what the current management, you know, with, well, Zach, who's been constant through all of that, but Andrea Stella as well, my ex-colleague from Ferrari, you know, they've made some sensible decisions there, but it seems to have unlocked this magic. I mean, how on earth they've gone from being, let's call it 3-4 tenths, half a second behind at the start of the season to last weekend, or yesterday, in fact, being 20 seconds in front. How have you had that swing on the incumbent world champions? That for me is the enigma bit, like how they've done that fast. I mean, hats off to them, because they have done it. It's clear they have done it. But that happens very, very rarely in Formula One. And I think that now you can see that it's like Red Bull when they started on their winning streak a few years back. You could see that it took them a little bit of time to get into their stride, to learn how to win again. But once they relearned how to win, then it's almost difficult to stop them. It's like I always talk about this when we were at Ferrari. It was difficult to get out of that, to unlearn that mentality of winning, because it was, you should be winning. You wanted to win. You got up every single Sunday morning, know that you had a chance of winning. And if you didn't win when you should have done, you were hugely disappointed, rather than being happy that you perhaps got on the podium or nearly won or whatever. McLaren are now entering that phase, which is really nice to see, because it's a great challenge for the Red Bulls.
It is indeed. So I think that we'll bring EJ in after we've continued running through the teams, because he had some interesting insight, actually, which I suspect is coming from a little bit of rubbing shoulders with his client, Adrian Newey, who I'm sure has shared some vision as to where he sees the small improvements in McLaren. Your old team, Ferrari, how do you sort of view their performance this year?
Well, I think, I don't want to talk badly of Ferrari because, I have a great passion for them. And, I really like Fred as well. But they've been a bit mediocre compared to what I thought they were going to do at the start of the season. I thought they were on a much stronger upward trajectory. So I would like to see Ferrari do well. I think what's really, let's say, what's been really encouraging about Ferrari is that they operate much slicker now. If you go back a few years, and we can be really open and honest about this, they were pretty dreadful at the track, right? They made a lot of mistakes. They made a lot of almost rookie mistakes, like small team mistakes. They just didn't get it right enough to be a top team, or they didn't get it right as much as a top team should have been. I think under Fred and the way that they've restructured themselves, they're doing much, much better, right? They're not making the rookie mistakes. But they seem to be a little bit up and down. And I think this is probably the story of this season, is that I think that with the compounds that we've got this season, constructions are very similar, as in the makeup of the tyre, the way that the tyre is made. I think they might be a little bit difficult to use. We sometimes see that with the Red Bull, that they're difficult to use. We've seen that with the Ferrari, that they've struggled to get on top of them in some races. Some races have been absolutely awful, and then others they kind of come back. We've even seen them winning races this year. But I've got a lot of confidence. I don't know whether for this season, but certainly for when Lewis gets there, I think that he is going to be a catalyst for good things to happen there.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I want to ask you on that, because I'm thinking if Lewis is coming there without the relationship he's had with Peter Bonington, his engineer, how important it is. The race driver and engineer, you're part engineer and you're part psychologist. You know when to give him a kick and you know when to give him a cuddle. And yeah. I just think Lewis walking into Ferrari on his own, he knows Fred. He doesn't really know that many other people. So do you think it's just a respect thing? It's a bit like, Michael walking into Mercedes, where you suddenly go, wow, we must be a really good team when a driver like that chooses us.
When a driver like Lewis chooses your team, when a 7 times world champion chooses your team to come and work at your team, first of all, I don't think he needs to bring an entourage with him. And I always spoke about this publicly, both for Lewis himself, I think, but also for people like Pete, for people like Bono, I think that that's quite a dangerous game to play, to kind of follow the driver around, because if the driver falls out of favour or the driver decides that after 1 year this is not for him, he can't take the entourage with him. So I think that Lewis has done the right thing. He'd obviously have like Team LH around him, like his management and trainers and people like that. But I think trying to take engineers would have been a bit of a misstep. So I think that the team will embrace him. I think that if you go there with a bit of a reputation like what Lewis has got for being able to deliver, the team will get around him. The team will definitely get around him. Then Lewis has got to do his part as well. Lewis has definitely got to play his part in endearing himself and embracing the culture of the team, and not like being on the periphery of that. And if he can do that, they will love him. Honestly, he will walk on water. And I think the team will now feel, just like you just said, DC, the team will now feel they'll just be able to raise their game by another 1-2%, because they'll feel that confidence, right? This is a 7 times world champion coming into your team, having chosen your team over effectively a team he's been at for, let's call it, all of his life, if you take the engine part of it. Suddenly he's walking away from all of that and all of that legacy, and he's choosing you guys. So that gives you a massive boost of confidence. And if everybody works that 0.5% harder or smarter, then great things can happen.
Okay. Well, look, I'm going to just wrap this part up by asking you about Mercedes, and then what I'd like to do is have you and EJ sort of dissect the rest, if you like, because once you've covered Mercedes, that's us covered the winners so far this year. And then I'd like you to sort of pick into one of the others, whether it's Aston, whether it's AlphaTauri, whether it's whatever one, Williams, and tell me, what impresses you about them. So hit us with Mercedes. They've won a few races. I've been surprised, actually, how quickly they've come back to success. What's your view?
Yeah, similar. I don't know how I'd say surprised. I would more say relieved. I feel that, knowing some of the guys there, some of the guys in senior positions, you feel the relief, because the one thing that all three of us know about Formula One is you don't deserve anything in Formula One, right? You certainly don't deserve. I put that wrongly. You don't deserve to win in Formula One. The people who deserve to win are the people that put the hardest work in. So Mercedes didn't deserve to win whilst they weren't doing the best job. They deserve to win and get those 7 years of world championships or whatever it was on the bounce, because they were doing the best job. And then the car simply wasn't good enough at the start of this new era of regulations, and they've really had to dig deep. You can see that, and you can see how much it hurts them. You see it even if you don't know these guys. You see it in their media interviews. You see it in Toto's media interviews. Then if you know these guys personally, you can see how much it hurts them. They just want to win, and they just want to do everything they can to get back. So they've really double down on what they needed to do. They have understood the car. They've done that quietly without a lot of furore, which has been really nice to watch. And they've got a decent car now. It's a bit up and down, like I said, because I honestly think that we've got some nuances with the tyres that the teams are not quite on top of yet. And that's why we see some teams which are, ahead by a canter at some Grand Prix and then struggling at the next one. And I think we've seen that with Mercedes a little bit. Certainly the car characteristics are certainly suited to other circuits more than others, but they now need to do it more consistently. And I think we were getting a bit of that consistency before the summer break, but perhaps, it's just dropped off a bit. Let's see what they can do at the next one.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's us covered the top 4 teams right now. So of the remaining 6, we've got Aston Martin, RB, Haas, Alpine, Williams, and then Sauber bringing up the rear with no points. The standout for me probably is the fact that Haas are in 7, and not standout in terms of, they've won a Grand Prix, but they're in front of Alpine, they're in front of Williams, they're in front of Sauber, who've been around for a long time. So they've actually done a pretty good job so far, whilst not really being seen as a real contender to breaking into the top. spot, of those that could be seen to be getting back into that battle for the top three in the constructors, you've got to say Williams, Alpine and Aston. So is there any of the other teams that are standing out for you, Rob, or you, Eddie, that you think, yeah, you know what, I'm feeling it. I can see 2, 3, 4 years from now, they're going to be in amongst it.
No doubt about Alpine. We've had a couple of shows with Flavio, and you may remember when we were together, Rob, Flavio was the one person who would walk in and out. I mean, I could be having a meeting with one of my major sponsors or my bank manager or whoever, and Flavio would just burst in. That's the way he was. But, that was reciprocated. I would do the same. That doesn't happen now, but Flavio was a very special man in my time in Formula One. And some things I hated him for and some things I loved him for. But you know what he will do, and he gave me his word. I promise you, Eddie, listen to the podcast. I promise you by 26 or 27, Alpine will be on the podium. I'm not going to stand up and say I disagree, because I actually do agree. He has a magic wand that is able to make things happen. And Flavio wants to build the best car possible. We've already said this. And then the best driver will naturally be attracted to that car. And that's his way. That's his philosophy. Other people go the other way around. Get the best driver. Let's see how we can make it work. Like that's what Ferrari's point. Get Lewis Hamilton. But let me please tell you just something you said earlier, Rob, about Lewis. There is no doubt that the Italian framework and the mentality and how they operate is different. So there's a bit of a learning curve there for Lewis. And please also remember something, that in Leclerc, in Charles, they have a little treasure, they think. They absolutely adore him. There's no one like him in many respects. And he has a particularly nice person. So for Lewis to go in there and assume that he's going to just walk all over Charles Leclerc, I don't think Lewis is thinking like that, and he shouldn't think like that. It's going to be a tough call, and it's one of the great intriguing battles that I'm looking forward to next year, is how those two square up to each other.
I don't think that Lewis will go in there with that attitude. I think that Lewis is a true professional. I think he knows how good Charles is. But he will also back himself to beat him over 24 races or whatever it is. So I think they probably will.
And you think he will?
A decent dynamic. Yeah, I think he will. I think there'll come a point when he won't be able to do that anymore, but it's certainly not now. I mean, the guy's so fit, he's so mentally strong. I think when he's motivated, what we've seen, I think, with Lewis over these last couple of years is, I don't want to call it a lack of motivation, because that would be disrespectful to the guy. But I think we've seen every now and again, like, some frustration that comes through in him not being able to then deliver at 10/10ths like he has done in the past. But there is no doubt about the amount of passion that this guy has and how much he wants to win. I mean, if you look at his reaction after the British Grand Prix this year, that tells you everything you need to know, right? This is a guy that hasn't won for, I can't even remember how long it was, because these type of facts don't interest me that much, but is it 2 years, 3 years, something like that? And then he comes back and he wins, and all of us who were lucky to be there and watch it live, it was just like a masterclass in Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, how to win a race. Super impressive drive. But you saw the passion at the end, you saw the emotion at the end. This guy wants to win. But I think he's, I think with anybody who's done really well in life, there's also a certain amount of humility, when you're constantly looking inward and thinking, what do I need to do better? So I don't think Lewis is going to go to Ferrari and think that he's going to be able to trounce Charles, because I don't think, first of all, he won't be able to. Because it just won't be that easy, because Charles is a great peddler, as you say, Eddie. But second, I think I believe he will work very hard. I think he'll work very hard. I think he'll integrate himself into the team, and I think that will be the making of the next stage of Ferrari. And by the way, we haven't talked about any of the small teams that DC asked us to talk about.
Because DC, normally on an issue like this, either he goes technical on us and doesn't turn up, or he's totally irrelevant. And both of those apply in this case.
I thank you, EJ. I thank you. No, I have this view. I totally agree, and I really appreciate, Rob, the sort of length of detail that you gave us on that. And it's one of the great things about doing a podcast is that we can actually really give it some thoughtful discussion. One of the challenges of working in television, we're always, you've got 2 minutes, you've got 1 minute, you've got 30 seconds. So you've got to say sound bites to piece together an answer, which can be frustrating at times. But I see it in a TV soundbite thing like this. I think Charles will be on average quicker, but I think that there's a real chance that Lewis will piece together more victories until Charles either is the final product of a world champion and he becomes that man that just suddenly starts doing the sort of performances year in, year out that we've seen from Lewis or Michael or Ayrton or whoever your favourite driver is, or he'll be what's considered the one that got away, quick, brilliant to watch in qualifying, but makes too many mistakes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's another point in that chronological trajectory as well, is that and please don't hate me for saying it because it's just physiological, is that Lewis kind of starts to slow down a little bit. And when that is, we don't know. It's definitely not in the next year or two, because if you look at how psychologically strong he is, how motivated he is, how physically fit the guy is, I mean, look how he takes care of himself. That's not coming in anytime soon. But isn't this a win-win situation for Ferrari as well? Because they've got like this 7 times world champion coming in. He's gonna boost Charles, because Charles is in a situation where he's almost, I don't want to call him the young apprentice now, but he'll feel a very different dynamic and a very different relationship to what he felt with Carlos Sainz, for example, where they were two peers, both at the same stage of their career, or very similar stages of their career, and both needing to beat each other. Charles has got a bit of slack here, right? He's up against a 7 times world champion. It's kind of like, and it's a completely different situation, but it's like Felipe Massa in 2006 against Michael Schumacher. He was the apprentice, and it was all right that he got beat by Michael. And then by the end of the year, he was actually beating him on merit, in qualifying, not in races, but he did beat him in some races fortuitously. And I think we've got a similar situation with Charles. And if Charles is not the one that gets away, as you put it, DC, then it's just a win-win situation, isn't it? You've got this 7 times world champion, a guy who can learn off them, eventually become the real deal himself. By this point, Lewis is ready to retire and exit stage left, and now you've got like this fully formed world champion who's going to be a winning machine.
Yeah, well, if the aging process and the amount of energy and commitment, if we use EJ as an example, then Lewis might still be in Formula One when he's 70.
Ah, yes.
80. How old are you now, Eddie?
Shut up.
Are you younger than Bernie?
You were very quiet when you were a nice little mouse-like person sitting behind a desk, and we wouldn't hear you. We had to prod you to know if you were still alive to get an answer out of you. So the answer is, shut the fuck up.
Lovely. That's the way to treat our guests. Right. Any of those, the other teams you want to talk about, guys? EJ, of the smaller teams, anything that tickles your fancy? So putting Aston and Alpine to one side.
In my opinion, it must be absolutely terrible for those teams, because they're now, with the situation at the time at Benetton, they came from nowhere and they started to win races. Jordan had a chance. These new teams don't have a chance. Don't ask me what's happened to them. Don't ask me whether it's money, whether it's motivation, whether it's the people, whether it's the designers, whether it's what. But are you telling me that Haas could turn out and win a race tomorrow? The answer is no. And the situation is that it's very sad. The only one I can see in that group, which has a massive, massive history, is your old team, Rob, and indeed your old team, DC. I think Williams, but they need they need more funding, they need more people, but they've now, let's see, I think this is their best chance for a long time. Albon and Sainz will be a strong potential formula, and they will be, in my opinion, what they need to target is, can we make the top 5? Because to make the top 5 is not that easy. And can they make the top 5 constructors? If they can, then they can look at podiums. They can look at possible wins. Because, Rob, that was more or less how it was with us, wasn't it? Make the top 5 in the championship. It's a huge step forward. And we did that in our first year, in making the top 5, which was a huge accolade to the guys at Jordan. It was fantastic what was going on. However, so back to Williams, and Williams are one of the few people. I then turned to Alpine, and I think the introduction of Flavio and Luca getting the full support of the main board of Renault is huge. And I think that there will be funding there. There will always be availability to get and hire the right person. So I would say they're the two teams that I would look out to for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Williams, Williams, I think what James is doing at Williams, James Vowles, the team principal, and then the guys who's brought in, he's brought, one of our ex-colleagues, DC, Pat Fry. So Pat's gone there now. Pat was your engineer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Pat was a long-suffering engineer of mine, I think,
Pat
7
Fry
years.
has been everywhere. Jesus, come on, guys. There's
Pat
not a
at the
team on
weekend.
this planet that Pat Fry hasn't nicked money off.
Pat is a very clever, unexcitable in many ways, slightly rebellious when he wants to be, steady hand there. And I'm sure there's be other names that I haven't worked with, Rob. Anyone else that's been brought in that you've worked with that's impressed you?
No, I think Pat's the biggest name. But Pat, he knows, he knows how to build a fast Formula One team. He knows how to corral a team together, and he knows also, I think one of Pat's strengths is he's very good, getting very techie at the minute. He's very good at understanding what the tool set and the tool base should be in terms of what does a Formula One need in terms of infrastructure to be able to perform. But I think they will need time, and I think that I found this at my time with Williams as well. You have to push it in the right way. Don't forget, this is a team with a huge amount of history. You can't come in and put a bomb under it, because that legacy, and James has intimated this, I've heard in interviews, so I'm going to say it, that legacy has to be something that propels you forward rather than put shackles on you to ever develop and get better from where you are now. Williams have won lots of world championships, but they were many years ago, right? They weren't recent. So they are a team with a lot of history, and that history is important, but use it now to help you modernize your team and help you propel yourself forward. And I think if we can do that, and people like the new people that have come in, like James Vowles, Pat Fry, all of that team behind them, and the investors as well, who are, very, the owners, who are very, let's say, progressive and forward-thinking in how they want to kind of build this Formula One team. If they can marry that old and new together, I think they've got a chance of certainly doing better than where they are now. But it's like Eddie says, they've got to get themselves into top 5, top 6 positions, something like that, and do that consistently. That's what we failed to do when I was there in that 2014 to 2019 period. I think we had some really good years. We were third in 2014, third in 2015. But then we were crying out for more investment and different ways of doing it, building different infrastructure, getting rid of some of the technical debt, as we call it, getting rid of some of that legacy way of doing things. And unfortunately, the investment never came, which is where we ended up. I think Williams now are in a much stronger and much more stable position, but they've got to get themselves now into, all these changes that they've made in the recent past over the last 18 months. They now have to start bearing fruit, at least for the end of this year, 25 even.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's a lot of respect for Williams and that legacy, and their regrowth towards hopefully future success would be welcome and popular within the Formula One community. Rob, one of the things that I do want to talk about is where you are right now, and you have become a bit of an entrepreneur, and as you stepped away from the front line of being involved in Formula One, and you've also started to get pretty involved in the grassroots level in karting, and you're part of what's called the Global Karting League. Now, it'd be really good, I think, for any of our families out there, the younger listeners, just to understand exactly what that is, what motivated you to start it, and how do the young talents get involved in that, because there's no question that whatever you're doing at grassroots has a sort of growth vision towards preparing people for Formula One, whether it be as a driver or an engineer or a designer, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I think so. So I mean, I wanted to get, when I stopped being at the coalface, as you describe it, I wanted to do something, with the businesses that I was building that gave back in some way, or at least tried to make a change. And one of the things, we both know this because we're both sons of late teenage boys now. And in fact, what the listeners won't know is that you and I, DC, used to, still do meet each other at kart tracks where our kids go karting.
Yeah.
And so I got into that, like, kind of when I can't remember. I mean, Dayton and Frankie, I think, are about the same age, aren't they? They're about 15, 16. And so I got into karting, and I thought, this is really good, and it's really good. I've got no ambitions for my son Frankie to be a driver, but I just thought this is a great way for him to learn about life, and about winning, losing, and all the rest of it. The problem is, unless you've got a few quid in the bank, it's not open to everybody, right? So I started this really got me thinking, well, how do you make a difference? Why should we all be so complicit with the fact that it costs 100k a year or something to go karting? And if it is costing 100k a year, either as an industry, we are very, very lucky, because all of our talent comes from this tiny gene pool of privileged kids, or there's Occam's razor, which tells you that there's lots of talent elsewhere in the world, but there's not the opportunity. So I wanted to start something where the kids got the same kind of, exactly the same experience on track, build a credible pathway, like all the way through, from coming in at 5-6 years old and popping out at 15. And then, kind of pull that all together in in a league system, and also give the best drivers a chance to get into cars as well. So we've been doing it for a couple of years now in the UK. It's been growing, and now I am expanding next year. So we're going to expand it. We're going to go into different markets. We're going to go into the US. So we've got like an international and a global feel about it. After that, in 2026, we will be expanding Europe, Middle East. Want to get into non-traditional markets as well, so it does become truly global. India, Africa, China, places like that. And I want to start to find talent. I want kids to start to really experience this, but I want to also start to find talent from non-traditional backgrounds. So it's really cool. There's some really exciting announcements coming in the next few months about what this is going to look like, about some really mega prizes, about if you're good enough and you win, there's a car waiting for you, all of that type of stuff.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. And as someone that's spending money on exactly the same sort of vision of wanting to help Dayton, who wants to race, I think it's a wonderful way of learning the highs and lows. The smile on their face when they do well, and the tears in their eyes when it doesn't go well. This is a reflection of life, and I think that's where sport, totally, whether it's racing, karts, teaches you so much about once you go out into the big bad world, where not everyone's going to say yes son or yes daughter. And to that end as well, actually, I just wanted to mention the fact that you're involved, like me, with advising More Than Equal, which is the research foundation ultimately to help with the very high aspiration of finding the first female world champion, Formula One world champion. and using science. And that's what I'd like to ask you more about actually as well. Given that you've got this engineering mind and the science-based approach and, going out into the non-traditional markets, why is it that sometimes in karting we have like brilliant European racers and names that sound like Formula One world champions, but yet they go to cars and they just don't really hit it? I would say the home of karting traditionally has been Italy. The home of Formula One has been Britain. Not being disrespectful to Ferrari, and I'm not being disrespectful to British karting, but just in terms of, the karting industry really has grown out of Italy. Yet we haven't had an Italian world champion for a long time. I very simplistically, not using science, go, well, it's like just because you're a squash world champion doesn't mean you're going to beat Nadal or Djokovic in tennis. And you might think, well, it's a racket, it's a ball. Why not? If you can hit a ball, why would you not be able to be a multiple discipline champion in racket sports? Well, do you understand what I'm trying to get at without using the science? Karting is maybe squash, which is incredibly difficult. And tennis is the one that's more globally popular, and that's cars. So there was a question in there somewhere. I just can't remember what it was.
I'll work it out, DC. I'll work out the question.
Can I ask DC a question? He talked about who was the last Italian world champion, DC, and when?
I think it was like Nuvolari in the 50s.
Ascari, 1953. Okay, move on. Now it's your turn, Rob. Let's hear.
Eddie was there.
You see what I'm having to deal with? A nincompoop.
Eddie was his boss.
Yeah, his manager.
No, I was his financial advisor.
So actually, it is a bit of an enigma, and it's a question that needs answering by science, which is, it just so happens that one of the things that we set up was something called Talent ID. So we built within my business, we built this software platform which kind of scrapes all of the performance data of all of the kids in all of the world who are doing karting. And then what we try to do is we try to add all these like different metrics to it so that we can actually see where the talent is. And quite often what you see is results, especially in karting, results don't match talent. Does that make sense? Because you'll quite often see that, and there's lots of different ways you can explain this, but you might find a driver who has fortuitously found himself in a good team because they're paying for it in karting, and they're paying a lot of money for it, and they're doing more testing and more sets of tires and all of that type of, simple stuff that just gives you lap time the following weekend. When they come out into, I think by the time you get to cars, so if the next step is Formula 4, everybody is more or less doing that. Everybody's more or less doing the same thing. So it's difficult to get that advantage unless, rather than, you're spending 2x what everybody else is spending. Even then it's difficult to find the track time and all the rest of it. So we, have started to look at talent, or started to try to identify talent. It's not easy actually, because, you've always got the hardware in the middle of it all. So which kid's in the best car? But if you do this over a long enough statistical timeline, then you will find that you can kind of take out the machinery, and you end up just looking at how good the kids are. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting to see the kids that rank at the top. If you go back 3 years now in our database and say, well, who were the kids that ranked at the top in terms of talent, not in terms of results, because they're usually quite different, then those kids are the ones that are now winning in cars as well.
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating because there's tens of thousands of people karting around the world, if not more. A few hundred of those are show to be successful, but we're looking at trying to find one sort of Max Verstappen or one Lewis Hamilton or whoever your favorite driver is, and there has to be more than that.
Yeah, and I think there's also a point there in being, like, with the driver and the top people in the team, but especially the driver, in being resilient, right? Self-doubt is great, right? Because self-doubt makes you check yourself and make sure you do the right thing and get the right answer. but it's got to be in small doses. I'm not going to mention him because it's totally unfair. But I've worked with drivers, and there's a particular driver I'm thinking of. Let's say I worked on the periphery with this particular driver, who was very, very fast, but was so full of either self-doubt or like this apathy to hard work that actually never won as many races as they should have done, certainly didn't win world championships, maybe didn't have the opportunity to do the latter. And I think that, so attitude and personality and like how hard you're prepared to work, right? It's like anything in life, isn't it? It's like, there's all these overnight successes, which were actually 10 years of hard work in the making, right? So I think that even being a driver, you can't just have talent. It's like any sports, but definitely in if you want to be a Formula One driver, it can't just be talent. It has to be this application of hard work, this like unbelievable like dedication to your craft. And at that point, if you can put the talent and that together, you end up with a great driver.
Yeah. Well, I wish you all the very best with this launching of the league globally. I think it's fantastic, and I look forward to seeing those announcements coming up. EJ, we've taken a lot of time of our guest, so I think what we're going to have to do is invite him on again be our first.
No, actually, bring him on instead of me, because I've been here like a stonewall dummy. You pair of knackers have just taken my time. I don't know what I'm doing here. So I'm just racking up the meter, I suppose. So, Rob, you're welcome to come anytime you like. Just tell me in advance and I won't be here.
That is I can't believe you're being such an arsehole, EJ.
Listen, he was a mouse. Every time he walked by me in the factory when he was a young kid, when I was giving him a slap across the head, he'd doff his hat to me and he'd say, "Sir, anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Yeah, jump a little bit higher."
Such fucking bollocks.
Well, that seems like a perfect way to end another episode of FFS. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you very much.
Look at him.
He survived.
He
Rob,
survived.
Thank you very much. Always great to chat. EJ, as always, you get the final word.
Oh, no, it's just a growl. Rob, save me. Just tell me when you're coming on again. It'll be a relief. Ah!